This is Craig, and I'd like to show off a beat 'em up and how you might make the beat 'em up states for the characters. I looked around, and there's not a whole lot of information on how to define the movesets of these characters. Not how to come up with them, but how to make them so that you can make sense of them and so you can store them and change them easily enough. This game isn't implemented yet. As you can see, there are no hit points and there's no fall down. Because of this, I can't fall down and these goblins will hit me forever. I'm stuck in a never-ending loop. So it's mostly specifically to try and figure out the best way to do move states. I looked up this stuff on the internet. The closest thing I can find is the Mugen system, which is kind of an open source fighting game creator. But the Mugen system for doing it is extremely opaque and not at all clear. I decided to use some of the stuff from Mugen that makes sense and go ahead and create my own stuff for the rest. So what I've done largely is I've stolen the idea of states from Mugen, and every move has states. Here you can see that her punch move actually has 3 states: the wind up, the punch, and the return. I'm using the same keyframe animation for both the wind up and the return because that's the point of this. Isn't to create a lot of animation, it's to create the states. If I don't want to go through the recovery animation, I can go ahead and just power through with a combo. And there's lots of different combos I can do, and I can do things like dashes and back kicks and all sorts of stuff. The AI was a particular problem for me. Mugen doesn't have any AI worth speaking of. It doesn't address the issue very well, largely because it's intended to be a fighting game between 2 people. So I've created a modes system in addition to the states system, and they're independent, so these little goblin dudes can be in any mode and in any state. The goblins have 3 modes. They have the walk towards you in attack mode, they've got the flank mode, and they've got the wander around at random mode. They've also got a neutral mode, but all it does is assign them to the other modes. And I'll show you how I have defined these. This is the primitive, this is the goblin type. The modes are defined here. You can see that the neutral mode literally just assigns us to another mode at random, and the other modes are here. The modes are all fairly simple. They're written in JavaScript, and right now, instead of having some kind of targeting system, I just default target player 1 all the time. But in any case, the way that these work right now is that the goblins have their own little virtual controller that they play with, and I assign the X, Y, and button pushes. Down here we have the states, and you'll notice that the walk state in the sim function, it has no meat. This is because the walk state doesn't have to know about any of that. All it has to know is that it's controlled, and then the actual controller settings up here in the AI section, the AI creates the controller, moves the joystick around, and the walk automatically understands that because it's set to controlled true. The chain function, this tells us what attacks are available, and what happens when we press various buttons. Instant means it doesn't wait for the end of the cycle, the end of the animation cycle. It just goes. Reel is a move that happens whenever you get hit. In this case, instead of I've taken control away from the AI, there's no controlled true down here. So I've taken control away, and I've created this custom reeling maneuver, this reeling animation, which pulls back fast initially and then slows down. It's sort of opaque right now, but for an alpha it's not too bad. Here are the attacks. You notice the attacks have very, very little in the way of code. They're primarily just a basic set of attributes that you fill out. The hitbox is relative to the size of the hit coordinates of the attack are relative to the size of the hitbox. This is damage done and kickback, and there's an optional third argument for special stuff. Up here, this is the frame cache, And I'm not at all happy with the way that I'm doing frames right now, or the animations right now. I can specify any number of frames in these animations and make them full-fledged animations. But it's actually quite difficult to create the file that I need. And if I change the file, I have to go back through and update all of these, which is why they're all local here instead of being scattered through each state. To see the sort of frame, this is the file that I'm using for the female character, and it's just one long string of frames. And you can see that it, even without any actual animation, it gets pretty bulky. So I'm not real happy about that, and I can't seem to find very much good information on how to do this better. I'll have to think about it and come up with a better way to do it. The PC character has a lot more code behind her, but she's actually not complex. This code is very, very basic. It could be easily re-rendered into anything, although it's JavaScript at the moment. Each of these moves, there are a lot of moves, but they are very basic. And the reason I like specifying them in JSON like this is because you can go ahead and you can shrink whatever you need to shrink, and you can take a look at these in sequence if you'd like. Anyhow, this is the sort of thing I've been trying to develop just out of a hobby, and I don't know any better way to do this stuff, but if you guys do, I'd be happy to hear it. Already, the game, even with this low level of completion, already feels remarkably compelling to play, even with such basic AI and only one attack. The goblins can still be a little bit dangerous, especially because you can't fall over. Anyhow, I will leave you like that in eternal pain, comboed by goblins forever.